A passage from Because of Winn Dixie by Kate DeCamillo. The narrator, Opal, moved to Florida in late spring. She spends a lot of time at the Herman W. Block Memorial Library that summer. At first, her dog Winn Dixie stayed outside of the small library until one day he scared the librarian, Miss Franny Block. The first time Miss Franny Block saw Winn Dixie standing up on his hind legs looking in the window, she didn't think he was a dog. She thought he was a bear. This is what happened. I was picking out my books and kind of humming to myself, and all of a sudden there was a loud and scary scream. I went running up to the front of the library, and there was Miss Franny Block, sitting on the floor behind her desk. Miss Franny sat there trembling and shaking. Come on, I said, let me help you up. It's okay. I stuck out my hand and I pulled her up off the floor. Once she was standing on her feet, she started acting all embarrassed, saying how I must think she was a silly old lady, mistaking a dog for a bear, but that she had had a bad experience with a bear coming into the Herman W. Block Memorial Library a long time ago, and she never had quite gotten over it. When did it happen? I asked her. Well, said Miss Franny, it is a very long story. That's okay, I told her. I am like my mama in that I like to be told stories. But before you start telling it, can when Dixie come in and listen too? He gets lonely without me. Well, I don't know, said Miss Franny. Dogs are not allowed in the Herman W. Block Memorial Library. He'll be good, I told her. He's a dog who goes to church. And before she could say yes or no, I went outside and got Winn Dixie, and he came in and lay down right at Miss Franny's feet. Well, Miss Franny said. She bent over and gave Winn Dixie a pat on the head, and Winn Dixie wagged his tail back and forth and snuffled his nose on her little old lady feet. Let me get a chair and sit down so I can tell this story properly. Back when Florida was mild, Miss Franny Block started in, and I was just a little girl no bigger than you. My father, Herman W. Block, told me that I could have anything I wanted for my birthday, anything at all. Miss Franny looked around the library. She leaned close to me. I don't want to appear prideful, she said, but my daddy was a very rich man. A very rich man. She nodded and then leaned back and said, and I was a little girl who loved to read, so I told him, I said, Daddy, I would most certainly love to have a library for my birthday. A small library would be wonderful. You asked for a whole library? A small one, Miss Franny nodded. I wanted a little house full of nothing but books, and I wanted to share them too, and I got my wish. My father built me this house, the very one you're sitting in now, and at a very young age I became a librarian. What about the bear? I said. Did I mention that Florida was wild in those days? Miss Franny Block said. Uh-huh, you did. It was wild. There was wild men and wild women and wild animals. Now I have to tell you, I was a little Miss Smarty Pants with my library full of books. Oh, yes, ma'am, I thought I had the answers to everything. Well, one hot Thursday, I was sitting in my library with all the doors and windows open and my nose stuck in a book, when a shadow crossed the desk, and without looking up, yes, ma'am, without even looking up, I said, Is there a book I can help you find? Well, there was no answer, and I thought it might have been a wild man or a wild woman, scared of all these books and afraid to speak up. But then I became aware of a very peculiar smell, a very strong smell. I raised my eyes slowly, and standing right in front of me was a bear. Yes, ma'am, a very large bear. How big? I asked. Oh, well, said Miss Franny, perhaps 3 times the size of your dog. Then what happened? I asked her. Well, said Miss Franny, I looked at him and he looked at me. He put his big nose up in the air and sniffed and sniffed, as if he was trying to decide if a little Miss Know-it-all librarian was what he was in the mood to eat. And I sat there and I thought, well, if this bear intends to eat me, I'm not going to let it happen without a fight. No, ma'am. So very slowly and carefully, I raised up the book I was reading. What book was that? I asked. Why, it was War and Peace, a very large book. I raised it up slowly, and then I aimed it carefully, and I threw it right back at the bear and screamed, Begone! And do you know what? No, ma'am, he went. But this is what I will never forget. He took the book with him. Nuh-uh, I said. Yes, ma'am, said Miss Franny. He snatched it up and ran. I never saw him again. Well, the men in town used to tease me about it. They used to say, Miss Franny, we saw that bear of yours out in the woods today. He was reading that book, and he said it was sure good, and it would be all right if he kept it just for another week. Yes, ma'am. They did tease me about it. I imagine I'm the only one left from those days. I imagine I'm the only one that ever recalls that bear. All my friends, everyone I knew when I was young, they are all dead and gone. She sighed again. She looked sad and old and wrinkled. It was the same way I felt sometimes, being friendless in a new town and not having a mama to comfort me. I sighed too. When Dixie raised his head off his paws and looked back and forth between me and Miss Franny, he sat up then and I showed Miss Franny his teeth. Well, now, look at that, she said. The dog is smiling at me. It's a talent of his, I told her. It's a fine talent, Miss Franny said. A very fine talent. And she smiled back at Winn-Dixie. We could be friends, I said to Miss Franny. I mean, you and me and Winn-Dixie, we could all be friends. Miss Franny smiled even bigger. Why, that would be grand, she said, just grand. And right at that minute, right when the three of us had decided to be friends, who should come marching into the Herman W. Block Memorial Library but old pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson. She stared right past me. Are dogs allowed in the library? Certain ones, said Miss Franny, a select few. And then she turned around and winked at me. I smiled back. Number 6. Read the sentence. I imagine I'm the only one that even recalls that bear. What does the word recalls mean in the text? A. Remembers. B. Believes in. C. Misses. D. Is afraid of. Number 7. Part A. Which best states the theme in the story? A. There's nothing better than a good story. B. Being a know-it-all can be dangerous. C. Telling stories can help build a friendship. D. Books can be helpful in difficult situations. Part B. Which two sentences from the story best support the answer to Part A? A. I am like my mama in that I like to be told stories. B. Well, if this bear tends to eat me, I am not going to let it happen without a fight. C. Oh, yes, ma'am, I thought I knew the answers to everything. D. It was the same way I felt sometimes being friendless in a new town and not having a mama to comfort me. E. I mean, you and me and Winn-Dixie, we could all be friends. Number 8. What did Miss Franny Block ask her father for her birthday? A. A bear. B. A dog. C. A library. D. A book. Number 9. How does Miss Franny's story help the reader understand the entire passage? A. They show that Miss Franny's father was a wealthy person. B. They show why Miss Franny allowed Winn-Dixie inside the library. C. They show why Miss Franny is afraid of Winn-Dixie at first. D. They show that the setting is wild and dangerous. Number 10. How does Opal feel after Miss Franny ends the story about the bear? Choose 2. A. She is shocked that a bear would enter the library. B. She remembers how lonely she is. C. She is proud of Winn-Dixie. D. She is nervous the bear will return. E. She is determined to make new friends.